Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're cutting straight to the core of something really strategic. It's this idea that's defined Pakistan's governance, especially under military leadership.
Right. It's the view that the national economy isn't just, something that happens on the side.
Exactly. It's seen as a primary tool, an instrument of national strategy, even national defense.
That's absolutely the thread connecting all the source material we looked at. It's the central thesis. We traced it from, Field Marshal Ayub Khan back in the 60s, all the way up to the current SIFC framework.
So consistently, the message from these strategists is economic strength equals national security.
Fundamentally, yes. The economy is the shield. That's the core idea presented.
Okay, let's try and unpack this. It's a huge concept. Our mission today, for this deep dive, is to explore this chronologically. Look at the economic thinking across these different eras.
Yeah, identify the shifts, the specific tools and tactics they used.
And why did it evolve? I mean, why go from focusing on massive concrete dams and, printing presses to suddenly prioritizing things like fintech rails, cybersecurity, blockchain?
Well, the sources argue pretty clearly that the tools change because the world changes, the context changes, but the goal, that stays fixed. To guarantee national confidence, ensure stability, always through decisive economic action. What we're really looking at is a history of applied discipline, where development is treated almost like a matter of state survival.
Okay, so where do we begin? Let's start where this modern strategic approach arguably got formalized, the 1960s, under Field Marshal Ayub Khan.
Right. The era defined by the industrial takeoff and foundational infrastructure.
This period, it seems like it was all about state-led heavy industry, right? Very top-down.
Almost singularly focused on it, yes. Very centralized. It reflects those mid-century planned economic models aiming for really rapid structural change.
So this wasn't just letting the market do its thing. It was deliberate, planned growth.
Highly deliberate.
What were the specific mechanisms? How did they drive it?
The sources point to a few key tools. First, the big one, structured 5-year plans.
Right. The classic planning document.
Exactly. These allowed the state to set these ambitious, measurable macro goals for a fixed period, and then systematically channel national resources, capital, labor, foreign exchange towards achieving them.
Okay, so planning was central. What else?
Second, they created specific industrial estates. These weren't just random zones, they were concentrated hubs.
Designed for economies of scale.
Precisely. Shared state resources, fostering specific industries, often textiles, some early heavy machinery. And this went hand in hand with a really aggressive push on exports.
Why the export focus?
To earn the hard currency, the foreign exchange, you needed that to pay for the imported machinery and inputs for the next phase of industrialization. It fueled the engine.
Makes sense. But all that industry, it needs power, it needs water, and the infrastructure projects back then were just massive.
Monumental. And you have to see them as strategic projects, not just economic ones. The sources really stress the importance of things like the Mangla and Tarbela dams.
And there was a geopolitical angle too, wasn't there? Linked to water sharing after partition?
Absolutely. The Indus Waters Treaty context is crucial. Building these massive storage dams, securing control over water flow that was seen as fundamental for the long-term survival of the agricultural base.
Which in turn supported the whole economic strategy.
Exactly. These weren't just about generating kilowatts, though that was vital. They were about securing the nation's future water supply in a pretty complex region.
Okay, so here's where industry and agriculture link up strategically.
Perfectly. You secure reliable water, you get massive power capacity from Mangla and Tarbela, and that becomes the essential precondition for the Green Revolution.
Ah, right. The new seeds, the fertilizers.
The sources document it as a strategic decision. Introduce high-yield seeds, especially for wheat and rice. Combine that with subsidized fertilizer, guaranteed water access.
And the result?
A dramatic, measurable jump in crop yields. Pakistan became self-sufficient in food, which itself is a critical defense goal.
So the lesson here from the Ayub-era sources, it's not just about building stuff. It's integration.
That's the formula presented for that time. Infrastructure secures water, water powers industry, and stabilizes agriculture.
And the outcome.
A perception, at least, of internal stability. You saw it externally, too. A stable rupee. Strong national confidence. They were literally building national capability from the ground up.
Food security, power security, manufacturing capacity, the economy as the shield. Okay, that makes sense for the 60s. But things change. The world changes.
And the philosophy had to adapt. General Zia-ul-Haq's era, that was a really significant strategic pivot.
How so? Seems less focused on the big physical industrial stuff.
Definitely. The focus shifts more towards building resilience through faith and external inflows.
If Ayub was outward-looking industry, exports, global image, Zia's era feels more inward-looking, or maybe differently focused externally.
I think that's fair. The sources suggest a pivot towards internal discipline, maybe aligning policy with national values, but also, crucially, leveraging a massive, somewhat unexpected global opportunity. It looks like a response to economic vulnerability felt at the time.
Let's start with the internal part. That shift in financial philosophy bringing in Islamic finance, was that just politics or an economic strategy?
The sources frame it as an economic strategy aimed at discipline. The introduction of systems like zakat and ushr, these compulsory religious levies.
Okay.
Strategically, yes, framed as redistributing capital, ensuring social equity, but economically, a tool for fiscal discipline, collecting revenue, managing it centrally. And alongside this, you had the push for interest-free instruments in banking.
That must have caused some waves, right? Especially with international finance, which is all about interest. Did the sources talk about that trade-off?
Oh, they certainly mentioned the complexities. The argument presented by strategists then was that boosting internal moral discipline and financial fairness was worth potentially deterring some traditional foreign investors in the short term.
A gamble, then.
Kind of. The idea was that internal stability and perceived fiscal discipline would eventually attract more committed long-term investment. But yeah, the sources acknowledge it wasn't easy navigating international finance while implementing this new framework.
So internal discipline on one hand, but then this huge external factor comes into play, largely independent of Western interest rates.
You mean the Gulf boom?
Exactly. That completely changed the game. Suddenly you have these massive remittances flowing back into Pakistan.
Money sent home by the huge numbers of Pakistani workers who went to the Gulf states during that construction and oil boom.
A huge liquid stream of foreign exchange. And crucially, this wasn't just numbers on a central bank ledger.
No, it powered specific things back home. Absolutely. The sources are clear. These remittances were vital fuel for the growth of SMEs, small and medium enterprises. Lots of small shops, workshops, transport businesses starting up.
Decentralized growth.
Yes, and it also provided a massive boost to the housing sector. People building homes, improving properties. It created capital at the household level.
Kind of bypassing the big state planning mechanisms we saw under Ayub.
In a way, yes. It democratized investment, gave families the means to build their own futures, start small businesses. It injected a different kind of vitality into the economy. Organic, almost.
Interesting contrast. Meanwhile, though, the state was still focused on a different kind of resilience, protecting itself from external shocks, particularly in defense supplies.
Right. The strategy of defense and self-reliance. This meant scaling up domestic defense industries. The specific goal, import substitution.
Building it yourself, even if it costs a bit more sometimes.
That's the strategic choice. You might sacrifice some global cost efficiency, sure, but you gain control over your supply chain for critical military hardware.
Which saves precious foreign exchange.
And drastically cuts your vulnerability. Vulnerability to diplomatic pressure, embargoes. It's a clear economic decision framed entirely within a national defense context, reducing dependence.
So boiling it down, the lesson from the Zia-era sources seems to be about combining that internal values-based financial stuff with shrewdly leveraging global labor markets.
That's a good summary. Values-based finance plus strong external inflows, especially remittances, equaled a strategy for national resilience, using the diaspora as a strategic asset while trying to make the internal system more disciplined and self-reliant.
Okay, let's shift gears again. Completely different era, different technology. We move into the late 90s, early 2000s. General Pervez Musharraf. This chapter feels defined by connectivity, market reform, and the digital pivot.
It really is a pivot. The strategic infrastructure suddenly isn't just concrete dams, it's fiber optic cables.
Why the shift?
There was a recognition clearly that global competitiveness was moving fast, away from just heavy manufacturing, towards services, information technology, so the economic focus had to pivot, too, towards pretty aggressive liberalization, embracing technology, opening up market access.
And the most visible, immediate impact of that?
The telecom revolution, no question.
How did that happen? Was it just market forces?
No, the sources detail very specific, intentional reforms, deregulating licenses, actively encouraging international companies to come in, compete, lowering the barriers to entry.
So the strategy was connectivity is the new bottleneck. We need to fix that.
That seems to be the rationale. And the impact was immense, immediate, socially transformative. The explosion of mobile lines across the country. Suddenly people in remote areas could connect, could bank. It changed everything.
It wasn't just about making phone calls easier, right? It enabled a whole new industry.
Absolutely. This is when you see the real takeoff of IT services and BPO business process outsourcing.
Using Pakistan's human capital differently.
Exactly. Leveraging that large, educated, English-speaking youth population, competing globally in high-value services without needing massive traditional factories. It was a huge force multiplier for creating jobs.
But that rapid liberalization, didn't that create tensions? You get foreign investment, sure, but maybe also dependence on foreign tech, foreign capital. Doesn't that potentially undermine that earlier Zia-era goal of self-reliance?
That tension is definitely there in the source material. It's a recurring theme. The argument presented, though, is that the immediate need for rapid economic growth and job creation, seen as vital for internal stability, outweighed the longer-term risk of tech dependence.
The so-strategic gamble. Accelerate growth now, worry about dependence later.
Perhaps. Relying on the private sector, both domestic and international, to deliver efficiency gains the state couldn't. That seems to have been the calculation.
This era also saw big internal structural changes too, didn't it? Privatization and devolution.
Correct. Privatization was aimed at boosting efficiency, getting often poorly run state-owned enterprises off the government's books and into the private sector.
And devolution.
That was about decentralizing power, political power, administrative power, and crucially, financial power down to local levels.
Why was that necessary economically?
The idea was to spur local projects, empower regional economic hubs, make sure the benefits of liberalization didn't just get concentrated in Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. Spread the growth.
Okay. And looking back at that whole Musharraf period, what was the defining societal outcome? What did all these tech and market reforms lead to?
The sources really highlight two big things. First, a significant broadening of the tax base.
How did that happen?
As more commerce moved onto formal digital platforms, mobile banking, online services, it became more visible, more trackable for the tax authorities, less cash under the table.
Right. And the second outcome?
The creation, really, of a digital middle class, a whole new group of people working in IT, in BPO, in telecom-related services, high growth roles, fundamentally changing the shape of the skilled labor force, and to some extent, wealth distribution.
So the core lesson for you, the listener, from the Musharraf-era sources is pretty stark. Connectivity, telecom, internet, it's fundamental economic infrastructure.
Absolutely. It acts as a force multiplier for jobs and growth. This is the moment the strategic thinking fully accepts that digital rails are as vital as railway lines or irrigation canals. Maybe even more so because of the exponential returns on human capital they unlock.
Which brings us pretty much up to the present day, the period defined by the administration under General Syed Asim Munir. This feels like a modern synthesis: security, investment, and enforcement.
Synthesis is a good word for it.
Because it seems to explicitly treat things like economic leakage, stability, as actual national security threats requiring a full security response.
It's probably the most explicit articulation yet of that economy-security link we started with. It's about fusing comprehensive security, everything from anti-smuggling at the borders to cybersecurity for national data, directly with very focused, sector-specific economic development goals.
And the main vehicle for this synthesis, the institutional tool, is the SIFC initiative. Tell us about the Special Investment Facilitation Council. What's its job?
SIFC, as presented in the sources, is designed specifically to align civil-military execution. The goal is to attract targeted foreign investment, especially from Gulf partners.
Why the military involvement?
The argument put forward is that it's necessary to cut through the chronic bureaucratic delays, the red tape, that often scares off big, long-term foreign investors.
And provide confidence.
Exactly. Confidence that decisions made will stick, that they're protected from political shifts, that contracts will be honored.
So how is it actually set up to cut that red tape? What's the mechanism?
It operates with a tiered structure. There's an apex committee at the top for strategic direction, an executive committee for day-to-day coordination, and then working groups focused on specific sectors.
Like a one-window operation.
That's the intention. Rapid approvals, synchronized government effort across different ministries, and crucially, immediate enforcement of decisions. It's meant to send a powerful signal to international capital. We're serious, your investment is secure, things will happen quickly.
Okay, so it's about attracting investment. What are the main targets? Which sectors are they prioritizing? Must be high-return areas.
They seem to be focusing on areas where Pakistan has huge underlying potential, but maybe it hasn't been fully tapped. The sources consistently list 4 specific priorities for SIFC investment: agriculture, energy, minerals, and IT.
That's interesting. It looks like a deliberate combination, right? Agriculture and energy echoes of Ayub's foundations, minerals that untapped national wealth, and IT building on Musharraf's digital leap.
It does look like a strategic synthesis, yes, bringing together historical strengths with future potential.
And it's not just about foreign money coming in. There seems to be a big internal push, too, especially around sustainability, optimizing agriculture, linking climate change to the economy.
That's the Green Pakistan Initiative. It's framed as essential, emphasizing adapting to climate change through climate-smart farming, better water management.
Why is that a priority now?
The strategists clearly recognize that climate instability, floods, droughts poses an existential economic threat, especially to the food supply. So building climate resilience becomes a core part of national defense. Better water use, precision agriculture, these are treated almost like security measures.
At the same time, alongside attracting investment in greening agriculture, we've seen a really strict focus on market stabilization and enforcement, going after leakages that drain the economy.
This is where the security aspect becomes really visible, really proactive. The sources detail these severe, high-profile crackdowns.
On what specifically?
On pervasive systemic economic crime. Things like large-scale smuggling across borders, hoarding of essential goods to drive up prices, and massive power theft.
And these aren't just seen as, like, regulatory issues.
No, they're framed as active assaults on the national treasury, on economic stability, stopping those illicit outflows, making sure people pay for utilities. It's deemed absolutely necessary to create a level playing field for legitimate businesses to operate and for the state to collect revenue.
Okay, and the final piece of this modern synthesis, the really forward-looking bit, seems to be this emphasis on digital governance as a strategy.
This feels like the ultimate evolution of that idea of fiscal discipline we saw earlier.
How so?
It's using 21st century tools to fight corruption and inefficiency. The stated goal is cutting leakages, speeding up payments, improving service delivery through advanced digital tools.
That's it.
Specific references are made to digital governance platforms, enhanced cybersecurity to protect national data and infrastructure, and even exploring the use of blockchain rails.
Blockchain? For what?
For secure, transparent, immutable record keeping. The idea is to move national finance, critical data, maybe even things like land records eventually, onto platforms where they are efficient, corruption-resistant, and processes can be sped up dramatically.
Wow. Okay, so if Ayub built the physical foundations and Musharraf built the digital connections, the Munir-era strategy seems focused on enforcing efficiency and securing those connections across the entire system.
That sums it up well.
Which leads to the final lesson for the listener from this current era's sources. In the 21st century, the definition seems absolutely finalized. Economic security is national security.
It's total integration now. The way it's presented, the security apparatus views stopping power theft as being just as vital as guarding a border post, because both actions directly protect the state's financial health and its strategic ability to act.
This whole journey, tracing the strategy chronologically, has been really insightful. Let's try and pull it together now. A sort of a comparative scorecard. One engine, many gears.
I like that analogy.
Because we need to see these 4 distinct strategies, not as totally separate things, but as part of a continuous adaptive effort, right?
That's right. The engine, the driving force, is that constant quest for Pakistan's stability and strength. But each military administration identified a different primary gear needed at that time, addressing the biggest vulnerability or seizing the biggest opportunity of that decade.
Okay, let's run through them. Ayub's primary contribution, what was his key gear?
Ayub's contribution, it was all about physical capability, industrial capacity, the dams, state-led industry, boosting agricultural yields, all leading to strong export momentum. His gear was definitely build capability, foundational.
Then Zia, a different focus, a pivot towards stability through, well, value alignment and those external capital flows.
Zia's contribution, centered on resilience, self-reliance. You had the faith-aligned finance attempts at discipline, combined with those massive remittances building household capital, and crucially, developing the capacity for defense self-reliance through import substitution. His year was resilience.
Right. Then the acceleration phase under Musharraf, really leveraging Pakistan's human capital in a new way.
Musharraf's contribution, Connectivity and market modernization. That telecom and IT explosion, the market reforms, fostering a digital middle class, generating huge numbers of service sector jobs. His gear was connectivity and growth.
And that brings us to the current synthesis under Asim Munir. The focus seems to be on institutionalizing security within the economic framework.
Asim Munir's contribution. Strategic integration and enforcement, SIFC coordinating investment, the anti-smuggling drives, Green Pakistan, all aimed at driving targeted investment, stability, and productivity. His gear is enforce and digitize.
Looking back at this whole sweep, what really stands out, there seems to be this constant tension, doesn't there, between top-down centralized control like Ayub and then more market-oriented decentralized approaches like Musharraf.
That tension is definitely real, and it runs through the sources. You see this perpetual debate. Is state control more effective, or is market freedom the faster path? But what seems to unite them, despite the different approaches, is the consistent strategic discipline.
How do you?
Even when the approach shifts from state planning to legalization, the decision itself is presented as strategic, not passive. Whether the plan involved importing heavy machinery in the 60s or setting up call centers in the 2000s, the sources emphasize this disciplined application of state power towards guided economic goals. Development, in this view, was never just left to chance.
So it shows this adaptive effort. The core goal, national strength, stays the same, but the tools get constantly upgraded to meet new threats, new opportunities, water scarcity in one era, cybercrime in another.
Absolutely. The progression makes sense when you see it that way. Secure the physical resources first, then leverage the human capital through connectivity, and finally, secure the digital rails that now carry almost everything.
Okay, that brings us to our final takeaway and the provocative thought we want to leave you, the listener, with. We've seen this clear evolution, moving from the tangible, the concrete and steel, to the virtual.
Yes. We can sort of summarize the new arsenal, as it were. The journey started with very physical assets, factories, farms, dams, critical, foundational, but it has strategically shifted now into the realm of digital infrastructure.
Fiber optic cables, fintech rails, blockchain platforms.
The sources frame these as Pakistan's new arsenals, tools for defense and development in the modern age.
Which really fundamentally redefines what national defense even means in this incredibly connected world we live in now.
It has to. The core mandate we've identified across all these sources, this central lesson presented, is that when discipline, that consistent strategic focus, is rigorously tied to national development, the economy becomes the most powerful shield.
Build, digitize, enforce.
That seems to be the formula distilled across these eras, yes. Build the physical foundations you need. Digitize the processes for transparency, scale, and efficiency. And enforce the rules against corruption, against leakage, against external threats to protect the whole system.
It's a powerful framework, very disciplined, as you say. But let's push that idea just one step further. Based on everything we've just discussed, we started with the premise. Economic policy is national defense.
Right. And given that final strategic pivot we talked about, that intense focus now on digital governance, using technologies like blockchain, that feels like a leap beyond just physical stuff or even basic internet connectivity.
So here's the provocative closing question for you to think about after this deep dive. If, as the source material consistently argues, economic policy is national defense, how does this latest focus on digital governance, on blockchain rails, fundamentally redefine the very concept of sovereignty in today's connected economy?
That's the big question, isn't it? When your national finance, your commerce, your mechanisms for transparency and trust start relying on these secure, often globally interconnected digital platforms, is your sovereignty still just about controlling physical borders and territory?
Or does it become something more?
Or is it increasingly about securing and controlling the digital rails themselves, the platforms upon which your entire national economic life depends? That potential strategic implication, extending the idea of sovereignty deep into the digital realm, feels like the ultimate endpoint of this whole historical evolution we've traced.
Something profound to definitely mull over. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure. Always fascinating to trace these long-term trends.